A new flexible fiber optic cable has proctologists and throat specialists seeing eye to eye. Ah, hello. While you're watching this music video on your TV, your flat two-dimensional TV, try to imagine wearing a gadget that lets you see it from, say, the woman's point of view, or feel it from the frog's perspective, or even change the action as it goes along.
Let me introduce this frog man. You alone can get him singing, so puffed up, wanna be your king. Swear that this is royal blood running through my skin. Oh, can you see the state I'm in?
Or perhaps you'll slip into an air guitar karaoke suit and be Peter Gabriel. In fact, one day you might don a rancid leather jacket and a pair of commander specs and feel like you're in space saying, "This week, let's look at virtual reality." Wow, it's like I'm really here.
Rising anti-Semitism in Eastern Europe has voted English-only sign. 40,000 tons of armed with PCBs blew up the ozone layer today.
Standing by for solid rocket booster separation.
Greetings, prisoners of gravity. This is Commander Rick. You've probably played Nintendo or Game Boy or Sega! But have you tried these gizmos that contain complete adventure scenarios? These pocket-sized devices stimulate images in your cortex so convincing that you feel like you're face-to-face with fantastic creatures on impossible landscapes. Have you tried these things? They're called books. Science fiction books. Long before Super Mario was a game or a movie, Aldous Huxley's Brave New World imagined people being hooked up to feelies for the ultimate sense-around amusement, entertain the masses with electronic bread and 3D circuses. Roger Zelazny's 1965 Nebula Award-winning novella, He Who Shapes, which became the novel The Dream Master, imagines medical benefits from virtual reality technology. Here, a psychiatrist uses the omni-channel neural TNR unit to heal patients' traumas by entering their dreams. And the Dream Park novels by Larry Niven and Stephen Barnes are sort of like Dungeons and Dragons goes to Westworld. In the Dream Park novels, how accurate a projection have you and Steve given us of where virtual reality is headed?
Yeah, interesting question. We went into Dream Park, maybe it's been 15 years. I have a poor time sense. It must be something like 15 years ago. And holograms were sexy. We believed we could give, well, 60 years of development of holograms, 70 years, would produce some near magical effects. It now looks as if we'll have what we want for Dream Park much sooner. And it won't be holograms, it'll be virtual reality. We'll just put specs and earpieces in one form or another on every gamer. Viking helmets, snazzy glasses, right. Anything in between. Pressure suit helmets. Anything can hold the eyepieces and earpieces that will allow every gamer to see what the author of the game wants him to see. And many of them see things that nobody else can. A thief sees tracks into a locked mansion. A magician sees demons hovering, waiting to attack. God knows what the lore master sees.
Do you think we'll ever really see the sort of VR technology that creates the Dream Park in the California Voodoo game?
Yes. And I see an interesting point where the nature of the illusion is so complete that your brain can't differentiate between illusion and reality anymore. Douglas Trumbull has a process called show scan, which is a film that runs so quickly that the screen is refreshed so often that it breaks the barrier of how often your brain is sampling the environment to determine what is real and what is not real, so that the image is accepted by your nervous system, okay? And when you combine that with the ability to manipulate film on a molecular level, as ILM, Industrial Light and Magic, did over the course of, I guess, 4 films, starting with The Abyss and going to Terminator 2 and Death Becomes Her and climaxing in Jurassic Park, which in a lot of ways represents the maturity of film as a technical art form. You have the potential of creating imagery which is whole cloth illusion. There's literally no way to differentiate it from reality. This is both a very good thing and a very dangerous thing. I mean, photos can no longer be accepted as evidence in courts because you can completely, you can formulate a photograph from whole cloth. And I see the nature of our entertainment in those levels being so powerful that it could become staggeringly addicted. I mean, throughout most of our history, human beings lived in small, relatively small groups. If a juggler came from another town bearing news, we would watch him juggle in ooh and ah and listen to his stories about the rest of the world. And all the work would stop in the entire town while people watched this guy who has skills so mediocre in comparison to today's entertainers. He couldn't get on, Ted Mack's original amateur hour, if Ted Mack were still alive. I don't have any question about why people watch so much television. We're set up to pay attention to the new and the different, to hear news from far away. And something like television will just bring us all this imagery from all over the world at such an exceptionally high level, simply has never existed before. It's entertainment that kings and queens couldn't get a couple hundred years ago or 100 years ago even. So when you combine the technology of virtual reality containing imagery which is so vivid and so creative that it is beyond any of the dreams that you remember, because these are created by professional dreamers now. I see the capacity to throw millions of people into a very childlike state where they just sit and just, suck the tube, man.
Yeah.
It's fun to watch a tennis match. I had a virtual reality system. I could believe I was really in the stadium watching. It's not the same as playing. When you play, your whole body is aroused. You're running back and forth. You're exhausted. You're tired. You're hot. You're exhilarated. You feel the ball hit the racket. Vicarious experience isn't the same as real experience. Now, what I would like to see is technology that could be used in constructive ways. Now, television, actually, and computers, especially computers combined with television, do allow constructive ways of thinking. For example, you could give supplementary information in the show you're watching, especially if you could stop a show. Future television won't be live. See, the problem with today's live television is you have to leave the room for a minute, you've lost something. Or if you want to review something, you've lost it. Or if you just want to stop and think about what you've seen, you can't. As long as you could push a button and stop it, think, do whatever you want to do, and then go back and say, all right, continue. I actually once postulated that we would all wear helmets, and we'd all be watching the world through a TV camera with this, say, automatic tape loop. So I'd be talking to you, and I'd get bored, so I'd skip ahead. Or I missed the questions, I would play back and repeat. And if I actually would play back too much, I'd be watching the world 5 minutes behind the real world. Kind of weird. Kind of weird.
Already videotape blurs the line between live and Memorex. Sports broadcasts offer taped highlights and instant replays, while docudramas, reenactments, and reality TV further confuse fact and fiction. But VR may offer some real benefits. Nancy, run that tape of that conversation about how saving reality virtually could save reality literally.
One of the things that's becoming very interesting at the moment is virtual reality, whereby you strap on a headset and you have a couple of gloves. And there are those who say, well, what an appalling thing that is, because You know, people should be out in the real world getting fresh air rather than sort of sitting strapped into machines. But the way I see it is this. You go around the world and you see some of the really sort of extraordinary, fabulous, beautiful places in the world, like Bali, for instance, which David Attenborough called the most beautiful place in the world. And what we've actually done is we've turned Bali into a virtual reality. As we found this absolutely fabulous, beautiful place, everybody wants to come because it's fabulously beautiful. But then they start missing the things they've left at home. They miss the hamburgers and the T-shirts and the beer. And so they want them all there. And they want, and because we've now spoilt a bit of Bali, we want postcards there of what Bali used to be like. So in the end, we build a virtual reality, if you like, on top of on top of the Bali that used to be there. So we turn it into a theme park of itself, a virtual reality of itself. Now, if we're going to do that, if we're going to build virtual realities anyway, then let's build them in the machine rather than build them on top of the places themselves that used to be so beautiful. So I'd like to see a lot of that going on. Let's get inside the machines and leave the world in a pristine state. I mean, not that it is in a pristine state or anything like, but let's not spoil it any more than we have to.
Now here's our virtual vacation to the Grand Canyon. Oh, now that one's out of focus. Oh, sorry, now that one's in upside down, I think, yeah. Oh darn, my thumb got over the shutter on that reality. Actually, the real danger with VR is that it's too vivid. In Arthur C. Clarke's novel, The Hammer of God, astronaut Robert Singh discovers that actually walking around on the famous landmarks of Mars is a disappointment compared to swooping over the red planet in a computer simulation. In Jonathan Letham's short story, Walking the Moons, VR is used to get into the Guinness Book of World Records as a guy treks around all of Jupiter's moons without ever leaving a treadmill in his garage. Buy a NorderTrack and see the universe. And Neil Stephenson designed a virtual meeting place called Metaverse for his debut novel, Snow Crash. Metaverse melds VR with electronic bulletin boards to produce what looks like a street lined with bars. The hero, who adopts the moniker hero protagonist, downloads himself downtown and then bar hops electronically. And since it's all purely a projection, patrons can customize their own image to be as weird and wild as they dare. What if two people modem to an imaginary party wearing the same electronic outfit? How embarrassing. How soon do you think we'll see virtual reality entertainment centers in people's rec rooms?
I have my doubts as to whether totally immersive virtual reality is practical as a popular medium. I'm talking about the thing where you put on the goggles and you've got wraparound, three-dimensional, stereoscopic vision, and you've got, earphones plugged into your ears and gloves on your hand and on your body to monitor your movement. That's a lot of hassle to go to. I can just flip on my TV and, watch a couple minutes of CNN anytime I want. I can do it while I'm, watching the kids or cooking dinner or whatever. And you can't do any of those things if you're completely immersed in this virtual universe. And I think that's going to limit its acceptance as a commercial medium.
Speaking of the commercial aspects, it's interesting that the bar's hero visits are plastered with advertising. Why did you include that?
Other uses of VR that have shown up in fiction are often, they're potentially very interesting, but I'm not sure if anyone could make money off of them. I'm not sure if you could sell soap in William Gibson's version of virtual reality. And like it or not, selling soap is what media is all about. So the effort here is to imagine how the soap sellers would take advantage of virtual reality once it became technologically practical.
Great. You take a virtual reality trip to the center of the galaxy and see the Energizer Bunny. The cynical view of VR is a hallmark of William Gibson. His cyberpunk trilogy introduced the term cyberspace to describe the electronic plane we inhabit through our communications technology, from telephones to electronic bulletin boards. Gibson's cyberspace includes a virtual landscape that characters access by jacking their brains directly into computers. Go out, Concord! Woohoo! I keep hearing about how VR technology is progressing, but are we prepared for the social impact?
No, I don't think we're really going to have to worry about it too much. I mean, where is it? It's been heavily heralded for the last little while. I mean, I sort of think it's probably more significant, you know, the rise and extent of the telephone sex industry is probably far more significant in terms of virtual activities than the advent of low-end helmet sets for the living room. My tendency is to suspect that all of the VR gizmos we've been seeing in Sunday supplement articles for the past 5 or 6 years are going to wind up in museums beside things like the phenakistoscope and those other Victorian precursors of the cinema. And the real virtual reality will be something that doesn't require these gloves and avoid what media magnates tend to call the cootie factor, which is one of the problems in public VR. It's like, how are you going to clean these goggles? People are going to be scared of pink eye and things like that. And quite rightly they should. Anything that you have to actually put your body in is going to be kind of dodgy, unless you go to the theater wearing your Cincy suit, which I guess that's a possibility too.
So what if you invent a machine that allows you to sort of smell, you know, things around you, or to manipulate objects in an environment? Well, you know, big deal. I mean, you can manipulate objects in your environment anytime you want, and it's free and it's real, and there's some chance that something interesting will happen that has actual implications, and it won't disappear when you turn it off, you know? It's one more way to avoid risk, therefore to avoid growth. You know, if you think that that Nintendo has been a kind of spiritual experience for you, then you should look forward eagerly to virtual reality.
Amen. Speaking of avoiding risk, I caught a British series called The Good Sex Guide, which suggested virtual reality may be the ultimate in safe sex. VR prevents VD. But watch out for that repetitive stroke disorder in your joystick hand. For an uninhibited exploration of cybersex, check out the novel Aristoy. Talk about making it into the Guinness Book of Records. What makes virtual sex any better than virtual eating, which your character Gabriel complains always left him with hunger pangs?
Oh, well, you went and found one of those contradictions in my book that I didn't even notice was there. I think the sex is, I think that if you're going to do sex in virtual reality, which I, in this book, have called the onochronon, just to be contrary, that it's going to have to be more real than real. That it's going to have somewhat more impact than the real thing, otherwise you might not notice it. And so the onorochronic sex that goes on in this book is really elaborate and staged incredibly well, and partakes of items that are deliberately unreal. People float in the air and with various sound effects going on about them, and full symphonic orchestration, and surreal objects progressing through the scene, and so on. And it's essentially to make up for the fact that there are real dimensions that are also missing.
Could virtual sex ever take the place of biological sex?
Oh, almost certainly, especially among people who can't get any biological sex. That's the function of pornography now, is to buffer the inaccessibility of sexuality for highly sexed persons who can't have sex all the time or when they want it all the time. Masturbation follows the same procedure, and virtual reality will, in fact, take over that area. Another area that I think it might take over is when people just can't have a social relationship with another human being. Then they will invent a human being, either a robot or a virtually real figure to have a relationship with, and then they will come to love those unreal beings. That's been explored in science fiction before, but I think there's a lot more room for exploration there. It's a subject that makes people uncomfortable, which I think is wonderful. That means it's prime story material.
Prime story material for a lot of writers. In the wonderful story Desert Rain by Pat Murphy and Mark Van Name, a kinetic sculptor finds herself falling in love with Ian, a virtual human created by her husband. Maureen McHugh's short story Virtual Love is all about the fear of falling for a facade or having someone fall for yours. And ever since the first holographic movie clips were produced in the 70s, Hollywood screenwriters have been hot for VR too. Check out Tron, Brainstorm, Lawnmower Man, and most recently, Ghost in the Machine. What's that, Nancy? Am I supposed to buy a vowel? Oh, right. On Star Trek, The Next Generation, the holodeck has been a key element in a number of episodes. A few years back, one of my friends in control talked to James Patrick Kelly, and even then it was apparent VR was going to be fertile fodder for this SF author.
Tell me about how and why you incorporated virtual reality into Mr. Boy.
Well, I incorporated virtual reality into Mr. Boy because I think that that is ultimately the next, it ties in with my notion of human evolution. Virtual reality is the step meat will take before it becomes software.
Oops. Oh, boy. Oh, can you imagine a tape jam during virtual sex? You could be electronically bobbited. Luckily, the rest of James' thoughts are on this tape.
Later on, in a more sophisticated virtual reality system, there may be some way of putting these inputs not through the clumsy entry points into your consciousness of your eyes and your skin, the five senses, but directly into your brain. Well, at that point, when you're putting reality into your brain, you're very close, I think, to the notion that someday human beings may download themselves into computers and exist as software programs. So virtual reality is a step in a book which I'm working on, which leads inevitably, in my opinion, to artificial people. Not artificial intelligence, but artificial people.
Artificial people? No wonder Hollywood loves VR. While science fiction imagines the long-range potential of all this, let's find out what's happening now and in the near future from someone who's actually been doing the research and development of VR gadgetry, like the Data Glove and the iPhones from VPL Research. The founder of VPL is Jaron Lanier. Jaron, it's Commander Rick. I keep hearing about entertainment applications for VR. People are even calling it a new art form. But is this really where its greatest potential lies?
Well, from a commercial point of view, my prediction is that the single biggest market for virtual reality technology will be medicine, and the second largest will be entertainment. I don't like to think of virtual reality as a new art form per se. I like to think of it as a new communication form. And there is a difference to me, because you shouldn't think of virtual worlds as artifacts. You shouldn't think of them as pieces which you would create and then present to a perceiver. Rather, they're things that can be used and created as part of real-time conversations. So it's much more a medium for improvisation and improvisational performance than it is for the creation of fixed works of art.
Street theater on the information superhighway. What about the military applications? Einstein was horrified that his theories gave birth to the Manhattan Project and the A-bomb. Do you feel some similar uneasiness about the VR flight simulators used to train bomber pilots?
Well, I'll tell you, here's how I judge technologies now. What I figure is that any technology whose fundamental effect is to make people more powerful or smarter is a bad technology. Okay? And the reason I say that those are bad technologies is that people are already powerful and smart enough. Right now, all of our problems are the result of human behavior. with two exceptions only that I can think of. One is certain diseases, and the other is certain natural disasters. All of the rest of our problems are the result of human behavior. So what possible justification could there be for making us more capable? I think any technology whose primary impact is to create new possibilities for communication between people or new types of sensitivity of people to their own experience, that's potentially a good technology. And so I think in the broadest brush strokes, virtual reality fits into that category, and that's why I believe it'll overall be a good technology.
Well, then getting back to some of the more creative uses of virtual reality, do you think that this technology represents a cultural revolution?
Well, virtual reality represents a corrective revolution. What's happened is we've had a century's worth of culture that's been created on incomplete and sort of incorrect technology. If you look at all of the centuries before the 20th century, most communication between people happened in an interactive fashion, and that'll surely be true in the future as well. This is the weird century. This is the non-interactive century, when people have been used to the idea of perceiving things that they don't participate in, which heretofore would have been a bizarre idea.
Well, that leads me to the question you must get asked all the time, and that's the virtual sex question.
There's two variants of the virtual sex question. One is usually asked by men, and the other is usually asked by women. Men usually ask something along the lines of, could I like make it with Greta Garbo for my apartment? And this really cuts to the quick of what technology means to us in terms of a metaphysical idea. Do we believe that sex is something that's purely an informational experience or sort of a media experience? Or, and that the difference, the reason that we have human partners now is simply because pornography isn't on advanced enough media yet. Is that what we believe about sex? Or do we believe that sex is a sort of a mystical, mysterious experience that we can't really fully explain? Now, if you believe the former, then you'd ask that question. If you believe the latter, you wouldn't. And so the question sort of exposes an underlying belief system that bothers me a lot. And what it really bothers me to believe that you live in a non-mysterious universe. That, to me, is the end of life. Both as a scientist and as an artist, the mystery is what defines meaning for me.
That's great, Jaron. Thanks a lot, and take care. Well, I don't know. VR may spark a communication revolution, or it may just be 3D movies without the cardboard glasses and the headache. But it's not the end of the mystery and meaning of life, because those things will always be there for us in books, you know, science fiction books. I mean, Douglas Adams' notion of preserving places by letting people experience them virtually, that's what books do. Or Donald Norman's idea for a device that can skip ahead or go back and repeat stuff you missed, that's what books do, you know? Books. Try reading a book. The sky above the port was the color of television tuned to a dead channel. Next week on